The Toyota RAV4 opened the world's eyes to the idea of a compact, urban-friendly SUV long before cars like the Nissan Qashqai or Volkswagen Tiguan arrived on the scene, and that was way back in 1994. Since then, they've sold over 230,000 of these things. This is the 5th generation model, which went on sale in 2019. But new for 2021 is this very car, the first ever Toyota RAV4 Plug-In Hybrid. Despite its detailed hybrid history, Toyota is relatively late to the plug-in party. Until recently, the brand's only UK model to come with a charge cable was the rather expensive and lacklustre Prius Plug-In. But with this new RAV4, Toyota is stepping things up a notch. The numbers, from price through to power and performance, aren't exactly what you expect from a Toyota. This is a family SUV with a 2.5 litre petrol engine and an 18.1 kWh battery. It's got 302 brake horsepower and a 0 to 62 time of just 6 seconds. It'll do 46 miles on electricity at speeds of up to 84 miles an hour, and it'll emit just 22 grams per kilometre of CO2, putting it in one of the very lowest company car tax bands. On the WLTP test cycle, it'll do 282 miles per gallon. The catch? Prices start at almost £50,000. But obviously there's more to a car than how much it costs to buy. After all, most people will stick down a modest deposit, pay the fixed monthly PCP, and hand it back after 3 years. What you and we want to know is whether this new RAV4 plug-in hybrid can justify those figures and whether it's objectively a better car than, say, a Ford Kuga, a Peugeot 3008, or even a Volvo XC60. So the changes out here over the standard RAV4 are pretty subtle. You've got this dark mesh grille, you've got some different bumper mouldings and these unique 19-inch alloy wheels. Inside it's a very similar story. You get some different seats and some unique red stitching, because this, don't you know, is the sporty RAV4. Now if you follow me round the back to the boot, you have to bear with me because this is the slowest boot opening in the history of man. There is a 520 litre boot, which is actually 60 litres smaller than the standard RAV4, but you do at least get some underfloor storage, perfect for the 2 charge cables, which you get as standard. But all things considered, it's definitely big enough for a large-ish family. Now inside here is pretty much business as usual. We did mention before there is some unique fabric for the seats and some different stitching, but anyone coming from a RAV4 hybrid will feel right at home. And the touchscreen, well, it's still a bit laggy and not as responsive as we might like, but every version comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which means you can control all of your phone's functions via the menus or via voice control. The controls and the dials, they're all really easy to use and beautifully laid out, especially like these air conditioning controls, which use big, chunky rotary dials, which are really easy to control on the move. The seating position, that's actually pretty good too, and visibility all round is pretty decent, especially with the reversing camera. But given this thing has over 300 horsepower, I think we should take it for a drive. Now, the RAV4 plug-in shares much of its hardware with the conventional RAV4. It uses the same 2.5 litre petrol engine, for example, and it even has the same electric motor as the plug-in version of the Prius. But listen up, because this is where it starts to get interesting. That electric motor has a good chunk more power, and the battery is bigger too. And it shows. This thing is quick, like really quick, quicker than it has any need to be. You see, with 300 odd horsepower, that's 80 more horsepower than the standard hybrid. This thing has more power than a Porsche Boxster. Okay, so it doesn't handle like a Boxster, but with all that power, it's just an effortless car to drive. With just a small squeeze of the throttle, you're past that slow-moving tractor or in that gap that you wanted to be in. You certainly won't want to be throwing it around any tight bends. Okay, this car is based on the same platform and parts as the latest Corolla and the CHR, which are good cars to drive, but this light and lifeless steering in the RAV4 it really encourages a gentler approach. And despite the fact that it's 4-wheel drive, it doesn't feel like there's an abundance of grip. There are 2 trims to choose from when selecting which RAV4 plug-in to go for. Dynamic cars get 19-inch alloy wheels, a 9-inch touchscreen infotainment system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, plus wireless phone charging, dual zone air conditioning, and a powered boot lid. You also get Toyota's Safety Sense 2 package with intelligent cruise control and pedestrian detection. That car costs £47,395, but for an extra £3,500 you can go for the Dynamic Premium, which boasts black leather seats, a panoramic roof, a JBL stereo, head-up display and ventilated front seats. As we mentioned before, every model comes with 2 charge cables, a 3-pin plug and one for charging at public points and home wall boxes. Charging will take 7.5 hours on a domestic plug or 2.5 hours on a 7 kilowatt wall box. The RAV4 can charge at a maximum of 6.6 kilowatts, which isn't bad for a car of this type. There are several drive modes, 4 for the hybrid system, each of which that can be paired with either eco, normal or sport. There's also a kind of auto mode that lets the car run on electric power until you put your foot on the floor, plus a hybrid mode that will blend petrol and electric as the car sees fit. The final setting is a charge mode which uses the engine to top up the batteries, though we don't see many owners using this on a regular basis. Whichever setting you're in, ride and refinement really is very good indeed, thanks to some extra sound insulation and some acoustic glass. Now, it's quiet around town and on the motorway, especially when you're not relying on the petrol engine. Speaking of which, the transition between petrol and electric power is fine, especially when you're pootling around on the electric or hybrid modes, but when you want an extra shove of acceleration, the car can tend to get a little bit confused. Once again, a gentle approach is best. The big benefit, as with all plug-in hybrids, comes if you plan to run a RAV4 as a company car. This model's long electric range means it beats most of its rivals when it comes to benefit-in-kind tax. Of course, you'll only realise the true cost savings if you charge regularly. We saw around 43 miles on a full charge and reckon around 30 to 35 is achievable in normal driving. While this new plug-in hybrid RAV4 may be a good car in its own right, that high price is going to be a sticking point for so many potential customers. And while we may not be comparing apples with apples or spec for spec, it's hard to ignore the fact that you can get a Cougar or a Peugeot 3008 plug-in for over £10,000 less. And crucially, those cars come in under the 40k threshold for lower road tax. But if you can run one of these RAV4s as a company car and you can charge regularly, it could be a really satisfying car to live with. Head to DrivingElectric.com for all the latest electric and hybrid car advice, news and reviews, and check us out on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Finally, while you're here, make sure you hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel and turn on notifications to ensure you never miss a video.